What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Tonight we have on the one and only Robert. How are you, Robert?
Hello, Devin. How are you, buddy?
Wonderful, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm well, man. I'm excited to be here with you. It's been a long time.
Far, far too long.
You've become a father. I've done a water change. It's got to be at least
Lots
6
happened.
months.
Exactly. Big changes, big changes. So
Big changes.
yeah, so today we figured it'd be kind of fun to talk about like how much gear do you actually need. In general, I know you have done much more simpler tanks in the past, where I am a gear junkie, and there's lots of stuff that we use that we probably don't need, and lots of things that are nice to have, but I figured it'd be kind of fun to dig into, like, what do you actually need for a tank, what's nice to have, and kind of go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I don't know. Thinking a lot about it lately, obviously, with these new Apex controllers that are out. You kind of think, a lot of people are asking, in like, the Junior now, this like cheap option to get controllers. So you think, like, what do you actually need? And then, yeah, like I've done the gamut of both like super techie tanks and, literally rimless tanks with hang-on filters and, just a heater. I've sort of run the gamut, and I think I land somewhere in the middle, but I don't know. I think we'll duke it out and see where we land at the end of this. It'll be interesting to hear your side of it, my side of it, and see what other people think too, and see where they're at with it.
The funny thing is, I often think like, oh, it'd be nice to have a very super simple tank, but then the gear junkie me just keeps adding stuff and automating stuff.
So I get super excited about like little, individual things.
Yeah.
And then I always just think back about it's the installation on my tank. Like I love the gear itself and like what it could do and the promise of that. But then when it's like in my hands and I'm staring at my tank and like, I got to put it on the fish tank. Like that is the one thing. Like when it's already on there, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the whole like getting from box to fish tank.
Yep.
As that's where the hiccup is, because you build your tank, you get it all set, and I told Thomas, BRS Thomas the other day, that I will do anything and make any excuse not to put my hands in the sump.
Yeah.
I will make any possible excuse in my own head to justify not putting my hands down in there.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about changing out filter rolls, and yeah, when mine reaches the end of the roll, it's just so tight down to my sump. I'm just like, I'll turn it off for a little bit, and then algae starts coming, and I'll do like a water change. Like, it'll survive one more week. I'll just do a water change. I'll have to stick my hand in the sump for a water change.
Oh, that's funny.
And then I finally switched out.
The ironic thing is, I tripped my like skimmer don't overflow sensor the other day because I've been dipping my torches. I've been trying out that KFC dip, so I'm doing that. But I dump, my new salt water into the tank, and I take out tank water to use for the dip. So it gets a mini water change, and of course I tripped the sensor, and it's beeping at me. I turned my skimmer off 2 days ago, and I haven't emptied it to turn it back on yet. It's like terrible, but same thing. So I feel you on that one.
Yeah, and I like, and I'm still in this way. Like I like to tinker with the livestock a little bit. So, but point is I used to be like, I would have my hands in the tank constantly. And so we'll talk about that. I'm going to move my office down in front of my tank. So I'm super excited about this evolution of that. Nice. So right now my office is upstairs. My tank is downstairs in the basement. So we're moving some stuff around the house, and I'm going to, move my work office where I'm at all day, every day. I'll have the tank next to me again. So it'll be just like back in the day when I had multiple tanks and the tank, on my desk all day. And so I'm kind of excited about that, because I know, I'll be looking at it. I'm already like, I have a cart full of livestock I want to get. Just need to, click go on that. I'm already excited for having that there. So I think the tank's going to progress a lot faster, and it's doing great.
Yeah.
All the corals are happy, healthy. The fish are there, and they're, nice fat. The clowns just started laying eggs in my tank, so that's exciting. Very exciting. They were, 1.5 inch babies when I got them. Which
that's cool, eh?
Almost 2.5 years now, and they're, now they're clownfish.
Huh, that's awesome. Now, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Two important points that you brought up. One, I think it is important to have the tank somewhere where you are, so you enjoy it, and then you're not going to neglect it, right? Because if you're staring at it every day, you're more likely to do those little things and keep it in line and keep it happy. Where if it's down in the corner of the basement where you only walk down, every few days, it's not going to get as much love, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm down, like I spend a lot of time down in the basement, so it's not quite like a neglected zone. But I just know that, like, with me staring at it all day, like, and I'll be able to use it, it'll be like my thinking place, like right now I have art in my my office that I stare at, my trinkets. Like that's my my thinking stuff, and having the tank there is gonna be nice because it can be my thinking spot, and I can sit there and proj out on the tank. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, no, very, very true. So yeah, having it there will be good. There, you had something else you mentioned, tripped a really good point, but I totally lost it. Yeah, so having it somewhere where you are again makes a big difference. And oh yeah, keeping your hands out of the tank. There is something to be said about that, like the stability of not introducing, your hand sanitizer, your soap, and whatever gunk in your tank actually has a lot of benefit to your tank. I think keeping your hands out more.
Sure, and I've never had anything negative or bad happen for me sticking my hands in my tank. But the one thing to say, beyond that is not fussing with the corals and moving stuff around and moving rocks. Like you just 6-12 months from the time you put everything together, it just looks better.
Yeah.
When you're constantly kind of trying to move things around, and like that first year you're buying frags and constantly moving stuff to get it right, but get to that point where you just leave stuff alone and let it do its thing, you end up with something better looking on the other side, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, now on to the how much gear do you need? What do you consider the basics? Like what will you for sure will you for sure have to have on a tank?
So rock, sand, and water, right? Rock, sand, and water. A tank.
Yeah.
A tank. It's a dynamic question, right? So we're talking for a reef tank, right?
Yeah.
So you need lights. You obviously need flow of some kind.
Yeah.
And then some sort of form of nutrient export. So those are kind of the basics. Now, how you accomplish that is, I guess, what we're going to argue about, right?
Yeah.
Or what we're going to talk about.
Arguably, the simplest tank I've ever seen that oddly looked fairly nice was on a guy. It was like a desk by a window, so it was natural sunlight only, and it had pulsing. Yeah, it was just sunshine through the window, and it was just pulsing xenia. That was the only thing in the tank. It was a sea of pulsing xenia, and it oddly looked kind of cool. But I'm like, he probably had a small power head, probably a heater, but that was it. It was no sump, nothing else. I was like, because that kind of sucks up nutrients. So I was like, huh.
So I've had a bookshelf tank that was it had Tunzi makes these cool internal filters, so little boxes.
Yeah.
And they just sort of fit nicely down in there. And I think the tank was 20 gallons. Or maybe it was 12. I think it was 12 because it wasn't 20. It was 12. But I had that, and I had a submersible heater, and then 2 clownfish and corals.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I wish I would have put macroalgae in it because it was a challenge with that thing, like nutrient export, even with just 2 clownfish, shrimp, and maybe 1 or 2 turbo snails, like bigger snails.
Yeah.
But it was a challenge to keep that thing healthy, even with obviously water change. It's a thing you got to do. So I will say it was that, but the tank was successful. It looked nice as long as I took care of it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I just ended up taking it down because I moved and never set it back up. But it's certainly possible to do it. Just basically, a rimless tank. No sump. Hang on. I mean, no skimmer, obviously.
Yeah.
Hang on filter or internal filter, your heater. And then, technically, I think you could get away, like in those bowls they do. Like, you could get away with just water change and, like, making sure you keep your heat stable and flow.
Yeah.
But that nutrient export thing is important.
Because
it's just how you accomplish it, right?
Now, this is leading my mind to another rabbit hole. One, I'm going to say it depends what type of tank. Like, you could have a Zoa tank, and they're going to tolerate a lot higher nutrients.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that'll get us into, like, the other equipment, like, your calcium reactors, your dosing pumps.
Yeah.
So we'll just put it the way. If you want to have a minimalist tank, and not have to worry about too much tech, your livestock choices are important, right?
Oh,
so
huge.
Don't overstock it.
Huge.
So you're not having to deal with major nutrient export, and don't even look at stony corals. Like, don't even get sucked into a euphilia. Like, just make it work with soft corals and macro. And you could do it. You could have something so freaking gorgeous. Especially if you try to navigate that world of keeping some macro in there. And one of my favorites is Gracilaria because it grows a lot slower than like any of the chlorophylls or any of the green stuff. So and it's not like invasive like you get with Ulva or something. It looks nice. I have a big old garden of that in my tank, and like I swear up and down it helps, man.
Oh,
Like
it's
it's
sure.
choked out bubble algae. I have minimal stuff that grows in. Got nothing, like no tufts of hair algae have ever been in that tank. It's
Well,
just bubble algae that was introduced on a frag is the only thing I've ever seen, right? And
like,
then what grows in the glass.
if you wanted to be a super lazy reefer, you could do like a macroalgae display with just like a couple like pipefish or just super simple fish in there, and I bet you'd
Yeah,
never have any nutrients.
for sure.
Pop out and some
Like we've
lights, a
already,
power
I
head,
mean,
auto
we
top off,
know,
done.
like we've
Yeah.
seen it time and time again. Like if UGMs work, macroalgae works. Like you
Yep.
can get a 0 nutrient tank that way. Like especially, if you scale it, right?
No,
Like,
exactly.
the more you have, the more you have.
If I was going to do a super simple tank, I think I would do either zoas or rock flowers and just like some shrimp and like super thing. You could probably get away with hardly anything on that tank. It'd be so easy.
Yeah, and I've always like, and I say it time and time every time I build a new tank. It's like, okay, I'm going to stick to a theme this time. It's like it's so hard to avoid the mixed reef, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you have like you talk with friends and you have 1 foot in the reef scene at all. Like it's hard to avoid getting that Iranian stony coral or like just a coral you didn't plan on having. It's very, very hard to stick to that schedule, even though I might tell you over and over again to do it. But yeah, just a simple mix of soft corals, and in time it'll grow, and maybe adding like things like amino acids or some trace elements. But really, the calcium alkalinity thing, your regular dosing, it's just not something you're going to have to do, and they'll flourish. Like they're going to be just fine.
So true. Okay. Auto top off essential for you?
Yeah, it's a big one. I would. No, I didn't list it. I would say auto top is super essential. That was something I forgot. And like on a standalone tank, even like if I had a bowl tank,
Yeah.
I would use an auto top off for sure, 100%.
It just makes your life easier.
Obnoxious, right? Yeah, it just makes it so. And so a perfect example is my ATO went out last month, and I bought a new one, but it went out for like 3 or 4 weeks, and I was having to do it manually. And I mean, things suffered, man. Like things got upset in my tank, and I wasn't letting it go for longer than a day or two. But even in those windows, man, like the fluctuation, and it's summertime, right?
Yep.
I never let it run dry or blow bubbles or anything like that. So it wasn't that sort of typical irritation. It was just that salinity swing, just constant, and it upset things in the tank for sure. Like it set me back.
That's true. Now, if you didn't have an auto top off, you could theoretically just put a lid on the tank, and that would cut your evaporation.
Yeah. Sure. Or build one of them gravity top offs. They've got those neat. One you just set right like the Red Sea tanks do with the float, and they just set it on top. Or I think Ice Cap does one with like a 2-liter bottle, and you just do the 2 tubes.
Yeah.
I'm really curious how those work, because moving water to me would seem to have some sort of effect on it. But as long as I suppose the water level stays constant and never drops below
you're good.
The pressure tube, you'd be all right. I mean, imagine it would work.
You'd be happy. There was my first ever reef tank was one of those fluval edge tanks. And that had next to no evaporation. It had so little. Like I think I had like a water bottle of RODI.
At the top, and it's completely encased, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a little square to actually get in the tank, isn't there?
It was a nightmare if you put your hand in it because it'd overflow. So you had like drain smell. So that was annoying to change anything, but there was next to no evaporation on that tank. And it looked really cool. But it was a pain to maintain it.
I had one of those jellyfish
I don't understand.
Chrysals once.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those, the same sort of thing. It was minimal evaporation in there. I mean, I remember having to do it, but it was like a weekly thing.
Yeah. So that wouldn't be too bad if you wanted to be like super bare bone basics. But in any open and top aquarium, I 100% think auto top off is worth it.
Yeah, auto top off. I regret not saying that one, because that's up there of the critical things for me. I would for sure put that on a tank.
Yeah.
Just makes your life so much easier.
Exactly. Now you obviously need flow in the tank, so that could be, if it's a straight up glass box, it could be, like a hang on the back filter. It could be a power head. If you have an all-in-one, it could be a return pump. Could be enough flow for the tank. So it depends what you're keeping, but you do need some flow.
I mean, flow is critical, right? Yeah. I would say it's, you could get away with just filter flow. So like return pump and all-in-one, or like a hang-on filter, especially if it's a small, like 5 gallon, right? 5 or 10 gallon. But I think once you get beyond that, up past 10 gallons, you're probably going to want to have a power head, especially now that power heads are so the technology. I mean, you can get tiny ones that move water. They're controllable. I mean, CJ's got these little controllable ones. You have the Neros, you know. Tunzi has their little Nano. I mean, all of those pumps are, you know, small, like smaller than a baseball, like, you know, just a couple inches, and they move water and they move enough to, you know, to get flow across 20 inches, you know.
Yeah.
And just one of those in a tank will make the world of difference. I think both for the corals, but then also just keeping debris suspended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say for most tanks out there, power head's mandatory.
Yeah.
But you could probably get away without it if you really didn't want to do it, you didn't want to have the extra cord. I think you could get away with it as long as you're, you know, you have the return flow or filter flow.
On Innovative Marine Fusion, one of their 30-gallon tanks, one of those they used to have, I upgraded the pump inside to one of the CJ Sinker silent ones.
Yeah,
so I put a bigger pump in it,
returns.
and it had two, and I put those little motorized, those little ones that spun around, and that was actually pretty good for flow once I upgraded the return pump. So that one I got away without it.
You know, and we'll tie this back to that livestock selection we talked about.
Yeah.
You know, you're choosing specifically corals that, you know, sort of prefer that medium low flow environment, and will survive if not thrive in that sort of situation, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so we got that. Skimmer, in your mind, do tanks need skimmers?
No. They're a nice tool.
Yep.
And if you need them, you need them. But I don't think it's mandatory. This is back to the nutrient export thing, right? In this, you know, modern reefers, like, you know, we have so many options for nutrient export. Like we know how it works. There's, you know, you've got your turf scrubbers, you know, protein skimmers, refugiums, just classic filters. You can use canister filters. Like there's just so many ways. You know, filter rollers. I think if you invested in a filter roller or was like super diligent with your filter stocks in a small tank, or, you know, just mechanical filtration in general, like you're pulling one out and tossing and you know, replacing a new one every day or the other day.
Yeah. Like
you could totally get away without a skimmer. You know, just a couple fish. You're real good about feeding. I think you could totally get away without a skimmer. But most of us probably going to benefit from it because we like to, you know, have a mixed reef with tons of fish and feed them heavy, right?
Well, I think that's a big thing. If your tank is heavily stocked, I think even more than like the nutrient export, just the gas exchange and oxygenation makes a huge difference. Where if your tank is very lightly stocked, I think you can get away without one. Same thing in like a smaller tank. I don't overly feel the Nano Skimmers do a ton, so I would probably just pass on it, like a 20 or 30 gallon.
I've written a bit about Nano Skimmers because I have a strong opinion about them.
Do tell.
So I mean, you know, a Nano Skimmer by design is like small, right?
Yeah.
And the skimmer needs a reaction chamber. So by design, a Nano Skimmer has a small reaction chamber. So, you know, in order to get, you know, fill that with dense foam, you have to have a certain level of like pump power, right? Well, that's going to, you know, by the time you create the dense foam, that chamber isn't small enough to slow it down and to actually like really create that foam head. So you have two problems. You either don't have enough air water ratio and you know, to really do anything to create any kind of foam, or you have too much where you're spitting micro bubbles and it's just pushing through that chamber so fast that you're just never able to create a head. So you can get some skimming. Yeah. Like there's some of them work and some of them work well for what they are. But if you take that just relative compared to like a 50-gallon tank with, you know, just a typical in-sump skimmer, or even like some of the hang-ons, I think the Reef Octopus, I think they call it the XL1000, and then the Aquamax HOB1, like both those skimmers work great, but they have, you know, you look at them and they have a body, you know, the body is big, like much bigger than anything you're trying to stick down inside an all-in-one chamber that has like a 2-inch diameter and is, you know, 6-7 inches tall. And there's been really, really clever designs that have come up over the years, especially through that whole like all-in-one tank fad. But yeah, just, you know, if you have a tank that's under 30 gallons, I think you're much better off just doing a 50% water change every 7 days.
Yeah.
like huge water change every 7 days. You're gonna reset your elements, and then if you wind up with an imbalance of nutrients, just take care of it other ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just get up your mechanical filtration. You can rely on chemical media if you have to. It's not the worst thing in the world. Costs money, but
Yeah, it's not bad. Back in the nano days, I used to just use like ChemiPure, which got rid of phosphates and carbon all in one. Easy peasy.
Yeah. For nano, like those little ChemiPure nano blue packets, man.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and especially you buy a ton of them and you just have them and they're easy to every other water change or whatever, just pull 2 or 3 out, put 2 or 3 new ones in there, and I mean things tend to stay pristine. And especially you combine that with a large water change. Generally speaking, as long as you stocked it right, you're feeding well, you're not going to run into nutrient issues in those small tanks.
Exactly.
If you are, you're probably doing something wrong, whether you added too many fish or you're feeding too much. Like, you just have to be mindful of that bioload, which is so important for your long-term success. And it's talked about, like, it's something that we think about these days. And
well,
I think it's the focus though isn't bioload. It's like compatibility and things like that, and aggression. It's like, oh well, this fish won't get along with my other fish. Like, do you really have space for a crosshatch trigger in your 55-gallon tank?
Probably
it's
not.
Probably just not smart, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So planning what goes in there is really going to depend how much work, how much maintenance, how much gear you need. If you're addicted and you just keep adding stuff, you're just going to become a gear junkie because you need more stuff to handle your load, or you need a bigger tank because you can't fit any more coral in it and you keep buying it. Yeah. Speak from experience.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so lights basically you need unless you're using sunshine, but everyone's going to use a light. Everyone's going to have some form of flow. ATO, highly recommended. Now, for a nano tank, like, again, depending what you keep, if you're keeping nice, easy corals, water change is probably enough. If you start doing encrusting corals at some point, you're probably going to have to dose. I find water changes don't tend to keep up unless you do massive weekly ones, which most people don't. So usually there needs to be some minor supplementation at the very least.
Right. And you can do, like, reef tanks, especially if you're using the same salt and you're always mixing it, like, and you're real diligent about it, a tank can handle a large water change. Like, don't be scared. Like, you're not going to kill anything by doing 50%, 60%. I've done 100% water changes multiple times.
Yeah.
And, as long as it's, you're not taking a tank that's been neglected for 3 months and then doing your 100% water change. Now that's going to upset things because chemistry is all out of whack.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing 50, 60, 70, 100% every week, like, the things, it's stable because you're using the same salt. Yeah. It's using, it's mixed to the same salinity level. And, the replenishment of elements or the chemistry swings in between that time isn't going to be too terrible. I mean, nano tanks are just water changes for me, man. That's the ticket.
Easy peasy, easy peasy.
Yeah.
The other big note is if you are dosing on a small tank, keep your parameters at whatever your salt is at. So you do a big water change and there's literally no effect on parameters. And everything will be happy. So I think that's an important consideration.
That's too, so many people, how do I know what salt mix to buy? Look,
yeah.
Most of them are the same outside of their calcium alkalinity mag levels, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, there's differences between them and the purity and the quality of the salt, but at the end, successful tanks have been kept on pretty much all of the major salt mix brands that are for sale out there, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's not a salt mix that just kills everything. I mean, it's rare.
They would be out of business pretty quick.
If it's out there, right?
They would be out of business and you'd never hear about it because they would be gone in a month.
It would just be gone.
Yeah.
So point is you can have success. And so just choose the one that's like hits your budget and is going to be close to the parameters you want to hit, right?
Yeah.
Or, if most people are just going to choose the parameters the salt mix provides. So, just listen to the salt mix, right?
It's true. Okay. So we have the basics. Bare bones. What do you need to keep a tank, right? Okay. We got the basics down. What's like the next level for you? You got your basic gear. What is your, you don't need it, but you like to have a gear?
RODI.
RODI?
Yeah. Is that essential? I think it's essential. I mean, it just makes your life so much easier.
It's preventative. I would say yes. I don't think I've ever done a saltwater tank without it.
I mean, I've always had one. I mean, I had one when I was still just keeping freshwater tanks. I mean, there's just a RO, but yeah, I mean, so this is a tricky one because you talk about essential, right? You can buy RO water, and I've known so many people. It's so strange to me, it blows my mind. And I've met so many people that keep tanks with water they buy from their stores. And it's okay if you like going to the fish store every week, fine, and you don't mind, carrying the water upstairs and everything. But having an RODI just makes it like so much easier.
I did it.
You know the water's consistent.
Yeah.
You can mix it the same every time. We talked about mixing it the same. You don't know that they're using the same salt mix all the time. Usually they're not. Good stores probably, yeah, but yeah, you just have the peace of mind. It's consistent, and it's so much easier.
Yeah.
You're never forgetting. You're not going to forget your ATO reservoir fill. You always have water on demand if you F up somewhere along the lines and you need to have like water at midnight, right?
I couldn't imagine doing it now, but like in the early days, like I did the thing where I just got RODI, or like I remember you have those little machines where you just pop in a buck or two and it fills up your thing. I remember being there with 5-gallon buckets filling them up. But probably look funny to other people. But I got old fast, driving around hauling buckets. Like that sucked. Like RODI, I think definitely is a very strong, nice to have.
I would say past like just building your tank with your basics of equipment to like keep it to keep it alive and cycling. I think an RODI should be like one of the first things you buy, right?
Yeah. Speaking of
ATO is an extra kind of, but the RODI is like right there with it. Like buy your RODI and your ATO at the same time, right?
That's true. Speaking of cycling, adding bacteria to a tank, essential?
I've successfully done without it.
Yeah.
But it's been many, many years, right? And
to let it naturally
those tanks that did not specifically get a bacteria additive, like bacteria was introduced because, rock came from somewhere else, corals were coming from somewhere else. I guess just rock and corals would be the stuff, but we're talking the days that live rock was like the only thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can't say, it's hard to say because I've never. So here's the thing: is I haven't built, and Ryan's going through it now with his biome testing, which is interesting to see all these results and what leads to that. Well, reminds me actually. I'm going to interview Aquabiomics this week. So I'll write an article. So PRS.com, Education Center. Keep an eye out for that.
I like it.
It's going to talk about some cool stuff and kind of go in depth a little bit more about Aquabiomics and what they're doing.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But point is I haven't tried to mature a tank with, a sterile tank, dry rock, dry sand, with just putting fish food in it and just letting it sit there for 6 weeks, right? I've done it without fish and just put a little food in there and then dumped a bottle of MB7 and let it sit there for 4 weeks. That's what I did with the tank I have now. Is I dumped an MB7 in there. I dumped this German brand, a bottle of bacteria from this German company. I don't know what it is, but I'll find out before this is over. And then I dumped Dr. Tim's.
Yeah.
So I put all 3 of those in there within the first month at different times, but I did them.
Yep.
Added a little food the first day, like the very first day. I just put some pellets food in there, and I let it sit for 4 to 6 weeks, and then added 4 fish all at one time. And I added coral first. I added coral during that first 6-week period.
Yeah.
And then I added 4 or 5 fish at one time. It was fine.
Yeah, that's good. That works. Yeah, it just speeds it up so much. I would borderline say it's essential to either add some form of bottle bacteria or add, some media from a cycled system. It can definitely be done without.
What we should do, a nice little case study. You said speed it up, right?
Yeah.
And so, the rule with the cycles, it varies from tank to tank. And so, but what is speeding it up? Would your tank have cycled in 6 weeks anyway? Would it have been slower? What are the things that are affecting the length of that cycle? So interesting for Aquabiomics, but kind of they're like sort of the next step, right?
Yeah.
The nitrifying bacteria is just about it existing in the tank, right? Just about that particular types of bacteria growing. It really, it just needs to be those.
It.
So I guess the point is like
I would say.
sterile tank, nothing,
Yeah.
no bacteria additive. Sterile tank with bacteria additive food. So like with fish, with piece of rock, what is the actual timeline of establishing that nitrogen cycle? I'm gonna just go out on a limb here and guess they're gonna all be very similar in timeline.
You think so?
I would guess, yeah. Without any sort of outside factors. But maybe not. I mean, maybe maybe it really does matter.
I would think for just the purposes of keeping fish alive with the denitrification, I think that would be similar. But I think to avoid uglies and algae and diatoms and everything else,
Well, yeah.
I think that's where the bigger benefit comes of having that extra diversity in there.
Yeah, of course. And that maturation takes, a long time, and it's never ending, really, right?
It's true.
Past your first year, what's a tank that's 6 years old is different than a tank that's 2 is different than a tank that's 1, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So
I think that's what the cool thing we're learning right now is, like, what does good look like in that world of biome diversity, and it's like cutting edge stuff, and it's just so cool. I'm super excited to talk to the aquabiomics guys about it, just because I just want to see where they're at with it, right?
Just
where they're
poke them and say, where's our super bacteria soup mix that you just dump in of all the goodness in one?
Yeah, and I mean, they have some products they sell. I haven't seen them in stock yet, but they have some, like, some biome in a bottle type products. But I want it better than what, I want it said better, defined better, like more, just more out there.
Yeah.
Like, and I think we're getting there, but like this concrete, like, okay, this tank is bulletproof. This is what exists in this tank, and have that replicated 100 times over, right?
Yeah.
In that kind of thing. I just think it's super exciting to get there.
No, agreed. Okay, so bacteria, not essential, but it makes your life easier and speeds it up.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And is that gear? Meh.
No, it's not really, but it's, I don't know. You talked about cycling. It's part of the process.
Yeah, I don't look down upon using it because, like, personally, not anybody else, I wouldn't say anything like that. But I said personally, like, I wouldn't have any issue with using it, just because it's an easy thing to do, and I know it's beneficial. There's no harm to it.
And it's not very expensive.
There's no cost to it, or minimal cost to it, right?
Okay. Yeah. Now, next big one I'm gonna say, heater controllers. That is one. If out of no other controller on the tank, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones I'd say to add on. Some form of a heater controller.
So we're going to get into the meat of this.
Juicy, meaty goodness.
Yeah, well, it's smart equipment, right?
Yeah. Okay, so we got the basics done. So what this section could be like the wise add-ons, the raise your chance of success long term section.
So, and I think where, like, I draw the line where I say I'm in the middle is I appreciate a piece of smart equipment. I appreciate having a heater controller that can notify me. I appreciate being able to save a program to my lights directly. I appreciate being able to turn my return pump and power heads off with a button. Yeah. On my phone, or whether it's a single button on my tank stand or on my phone is fine.
What do you
Either
prefer?
Way,
do you like an app or do you like a physical
switch? I like
switch?
one button to do both.
Okay. Whatever
accomplishes that, right?
Yeah.
And not having, I guess the point is I like to accomplish a single button feed hold. So power heads and the return on the same button.
Yeah.
I've had it where I flip a switch on the surge protector and put them on a separate surge protector. I've had them on an Apex where you have a custom feed hold. I used the Reef Octopus for many years with its own feed hold. Right now I have the CJs and, just use their app for that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
A pH monitor, I think, is important, especially having, whether it's when you're having it notify you when you're away is amazing and great. But at least having a pH monitor on hand, right, is important so you can track it throughout the day. I wouldn't say it's essential to have the remote notification, but my gosh, it's essential if you want to avoid running into trouble, right?
Yeah, I know, very true. Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess the point is those things exist individually. Those pieces of smart equipment exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having an extra layer, I don't see a need to have the redundant control,
Yeah.
because in a way, I feel like it's you're creating another level, like another way for something to break.
With the heater controller?
No,
Okay,
a heater
okay.
controller with one on top of it,
Okay, okay.
right?
I
So in
yeah.
like heater controller, like having redundant control with the heater is smart, right? So you have one on the thermostat, and then you want one on your heater controller that can talk to your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then plugging that heater controller into a controller on top of it, I don't think it's necessarily needed, right? Not essential.
I do it, but yeah.
Well, you could benefit from it, you know. Plugging your lights that save their own program into a controller. I mean, it's not essential, right?
Yeah.
Your lights, you just program them once, you leave them alone. Plugging your power heads that have their own programs and stuff into a controller. I mean, it's nice if it's the only way to get a feed hold. I would say it's nice, but is it
Mm-hmm.
essential? Probably not.
I totally do all of these, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so many people do, and you appreciate the fact that you can go in and access it from like a centralized app. I get the
One
convenience of
app,
having a
just flick, flick, flick,
centralized
flick,
app.
flick. Yeah,
But
that is nice.
yeah.
Now, another good thought, or I don't know, a good thought. If you are using a controller, one pro tip is I love those like splitter cables, like those little, like the ones that have like the PC power that go into all the bricks that have like 3, 4, 5 ends, and I group all similar equipment to one outlet, so you're not using a bazillion outlets. I do that on all my tanks. It cleans up the wiring so much, not having 10,000 plugs. You know, you got 4 power heads, they all go into one plug. You know, you got 4 lights, they all go into one plug. It just cleans it up a lot if you're going for the controller one.
Right now, like, so my tank right now is operated for 2.5 years. I don't have a controller, but everything is smart.
Yeah.
Um, I am really hurting for a pH monitor right now, though. I have a manual one, so I check it manually less often than I should, but I'm very curious about it. And so I check it manually. But I think that's the one thing that I would borderline on saying is essential, is having that constant, monitoring for pH.
So that is a tricky one for me because most people have it and they do nothing about it.
Okay, here's the thing. I would say
And
it's essential if you're using a dosing pump to add additives.
okay, fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Probably not going to create an insane situation, right? If you're not using an automatic dosing pump and you're just manually adding anything or not at all.
Yeah.
Any situation with your pH isn't going to be crazy. It's going to be like CO2 related, where it's, you know what I mean? Like there's not really. Tell me a situation where it's going to go so bad that it's going to kill everything before you get home tonight.
If you overdose everything like crazy.
Well, you're not dosing anything and you're not using a dosing pump.
Yeah, basically.
So you're right. There isn't a situation like if you're not dosing your dosing pump, like that's going to happen where you're not at the tank. Exactly. If you hand do it and hand overdose it, well,
you know about it
hopefully
already.
You know that you did that. Now, hopefully you realize it, right?
Now, just to play devil's advocate here, if you do have pH monitoring, you are much more likely to fall into the rabbit hole of obsessing over pH and constantly trying to up it, which means you're going to keep messing with your tank more.
Because I'm not using Calquasser.
Yeah.
I dose, but I dose conservatively, and I'll adjust it manually.
Mm-hmm.
But I want it so I can optimize the pH. So I can use Calquasser and get it up a little bit, or I can, actually mine's pretty good for being in the basement, being in the summer with the HVAC or the AC on all the time. Mine does pretty good. But we're pretty, I'm home all day, and the AC runs all day, but that downstairs, I'll open the door, open the windows, but it just doesn't get the drop in pH like I've had in tanks in the past, like in my office or, in other homes. Like I go down to 7, 9, most of the time 8 at night. and then I'll get to 8.2, 8.3 in the day.
With
So that's pretty good.
With it being like crazy hot and running the AC constantly, it's like my pH has sucked lately again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing that why I want that pH monitor, to see what that does in the winter, because guarantee in the winter time it's not like that.
Ooh. So
I guarantee in the winter it's.
Oh yeah.
Because
it's way better. Ooh, yeah. Yikes! My pH is super low. Speaking of, because I turned my skimmer off. I should fix that today.
There's another thing, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting at the fact that, having that pH monitor is super nice, and it's good if you want to optimize your pH, but it's not essential. I think if you're trying to keep this minimalist tank where you have the livestock that doesn't require dosing, you have minimal fish, because pH can be affected by nutrient levels, right? Yeah. But you have minimal fish, so you're not going to run into this crazy nutrient spike. Something dies, but one little fish dying isn't going to probably spike your pH, before you get home tonight.
So, okay, this is an interesting comment. The problem with monitoring equipment is that you have to maintain the equipment, which adds more things to do.
Sure. I mean, I would.
Depends, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fish tank, man.
No, but like, okay,
so you got to monitor. You got to maintain the fish tank, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's just.
So.
But I mean, he's right in the sense that like, you got to maintain it, but.
Is the maintenance less than all the manual work you would be doing normally?
Well, and the fact that when something goes wrong, like, your argument goes out the window.
Yeah, because like
would you have maintained a pH probe to save your tank? Probably.
Yeah, but you're not that's easy. That's
that
like
way until
you calibrate every 4 to 5 months, then you're good. But like,
buy a new one here, right?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking now, because I'm a reef junkie, I have way too much gear on my tank. But talking about the maintaining, I have to change a filter roller every 2 months. But it saves me changing a sock every couple of days, right? I have an auto tester that tests, my tank for me every day or every couple of days or whatever it is. But that saves me manually doing it once a week. But yeah, I got to maintain and do it. But it is a lot less effort than me manually doing the task that is automating for me. Which for me, I will spend endless hours automating to save me 5 minutes a week, which makes me laugh, but it totally works because I like automation. But
yeah. And the filter rollers, I love that automation, right? I love it. That's one thing that's great. I mean, I do like when he says maintain it, like I think that's touching on my point of like it's an added layer where something can go wrong. So I see that. So like if your pH controller goes out because you didn't maintain the probe, or like loses calibration, and you're running your calcium reactor based on that pH probe, like where are you at now? You're kind of stuck, or your temperature probe. You can't get around the temperature probe.
Yeah. Do you know?
Because that goes out, I mean, you're kind of screwed. You can't get around that.
Speaking of a calcium reactor, see, I have all these like random back and forth thoughts on these things. So like even that, if my probe is wrong, like say it's off by 0.2, do I really care as long as it's doing the job of maintaining my alkalinity? Like, even if the reading's off, as long as it's keeping things stable, do I care that it's off? Here's the thing.
If it's off by 0.2 and you dialed it in at 0.2 lower, you're not getting the same saturation rate as when you dialed it in.
But does that matter if it's keeping up and keeping your alkalinity stable?
If it's keeping up is the point. So, and what would you do is you would probably adjust it, right? So if you're testing once a week, over the course of a few months, your pH drifts lower and lower. Well, at this point, you've probably dialed up your reactor a little bit. Yeah. Right?
So
you've probably, increased the drips a little bit over those 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, so like I replaced the probe in my calcium reactor a month or two ago, and you freshly calibrate, and of course, it's like 0.1 or 0.2 difference. I'm like, so now do I go off the new reading, or do I have to tweak all my prior parameters to match the current range is what the reactor should be at anyways, right? So it's like, okay, do I adjust my programming now to match the new reading because I know it's stable as it's working? So that's why I was just debating that one.
And I mean, centralizing everything on one platform, right? Well, if the platform itself goes down, now you're relying on a fallback, which, controllers have fallbacks. But, you get my point there is like, is that a risk?
Yeah.
And with everything smart these days, I just don't, Like they're nice to have, and I'm not going to argue that. But is it essential? I don't know. But monitoring, I think I would arm wrestle for monitoring being essential, especially temp.
Yep.
pH is right there. Water level and leaks and stuff. That's not essential, but it's sure nice, man.
No, I agree.
Just a peace of mind thing. But temperature monitoring, that's essential.
Okay, so question in the chat: what's the cheapest way to be able to monitor pH and/or alkalinity, avoiding spending $1,000 on an Apex setup? If you want to monitor alkalinity, that's not cheap regardless. If you want to automate that, either way, an auto tester is going to be $600-700 at minimum. pH, they do have a monitoring only Apex now, which is the Junior, which is $300, I think.
Yep, $300, $299, I believe.
No,
and the cool part with that, and you say without $300 gets you into really a fully capable Apex. So if you think you're ever gonna, most of us do get interested in automation and control of some kind, you can still do all that stuff with the Junior, which is nice. And you get temp, pH, leak detection.
Yep.
And a water level optical sensor for ideally water level monitoring in your sump for the $300.
Now, if you want
pH
the cheapest
monitor only, it doesn't talk to you.
$109.99.
Exactly. And it doesn't talk to you though.
Yeah.
So at that point, you might as well just get a pH pen for $70 because it's just something you're going to do, and the accuracy and technology of that pen and the pH monitor, a monitor that sits in there all the time, is similar if not the same. I would spring for the monitor if you're going to get in the world of wanting to watch pH, right?
Yeah.
Then at that point, pH does change with your alkalinity and your calcium, and it is very, very useful if you're in that era of trying to figure out calcium and alkalinity and magnesium and dialing that in and understanding when it's off in the tank and identifying that before it's too late. pH is it's really good for that. Because it's pH is a little lower today, I bet you alkalinity is off, and then boom, you hit it and it's low.
That's a good point, actually.
At least that's how I learned, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And now I'm so dialed with it, you just get a good feel for your tank. But yeah, if you're in that zone of being curious about pH, man, I would spring for something like the Junior that can talk to you.
Yeah,
it's unique. There's nothing out there in that price point that can do that. What is the Hydros? What is the Hydros equivalent of that does pH?
Hydros starter pack $449. I don't know if that's the cheapest one.
Yeah, that's the...
Hydros.
But I mean, Hydros and Apex would be the two I think that are going to give you your best value for something that can you can connect to remotely or talk to you, get on your phone with an app.
Yep. And
it's constant monitoring with pH.
Yeah. Now, I've never actually seen it for sale, but I think I saw in Reef Builder's video or somewhere. But they had a Bluetooth pH pen from Hana.
Yeah, that one. I think that's still. I don't know. Is it a thing? Let's see here.
I don't know.
That's been talked about. I've talked about that, for at least a couple years.
I've never seen it for sale though. So
yeah, I haven't seen it either, and
okay.
I think there's something fundamental with it.
All right, fair.
I think it's not constant because it's Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So it's not going to Bluetooth to your modem and talk to your phone.
Yeah, so it'd have to talk to your phone.
You got to be there, right? It's nice because it's wireless.
Yeah.
But you got to be within 60 feet of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's still. Yeah, I think the cool thing would be Bluetooth to your Apex. That would be dope because then you're not dealing with
wires.
4 wires. Wires.
I would love if they did. That'd be awesome if all your probes, everything was just Bluetooth, no wires. You don't clean your sump and all your stuff would be.
The discussion I had with some folks in the industry about that was powering it, right? You got to have a battery.
Yeah.
But lithium ions, right?
Oh yeah.
They're pretty impressive these days and tiny.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it would be reliable enough, especially if we're relying on Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it would work.
I think so too. So Hydros has a monitor one for the same price, $199, but it doesn't have a pH probe with it, so you still have to spend another $80 on the pH probe. So I guess it's similar in the end.
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah, I have Bluetooth probes. I do too. I think that'd be sweet. I'd love not having wires everywhere. It'd be so nice.
Yeah, Well, and that's the big thing about this whole like why I find myself in the middle is avoiding more wires. And I talked about making any excuse I possibly can to not want to rip it apart and add more stuff
Yeah.
because of dealing with all that, right?
Yeah, it's true. I
Yeah.
I recently ripped apart my one in the frag tank and redid all the wires down there, and it was like a rat's nest when I started. It's so much nicer to have it organized, but so much work, so many wires for all the gear that we put on there. That's the downfall. Power bricks and gear. 25 years of reefing. I may actually get a controller, but it will have to have Bluetooth and monitor without Wi-Fi. Not sure if that exists. A lot of the controllers, you can still have a local interface. At least I know, like there's like the Apex out local on there. I know the GHL you can connect to it locally. I'm not sure about Hydros if you can connect to it locally. I think you need the internet for it, but someone have to confirm that one. So lots of them you can do locally on your local Wi-Fi. But yeah, nothing for
Yeah,
Bluetooth.
sure. You can connect to, it connects to your local network and then you just connect right to that.
Yeah.
So it's, you just connect directly to the controller basically.
Yeah, exactly. Wire management is hard. Yes, it is. That's the downfall. Hydros has X3 monitoring pack 299 with the probe. Okay, there you go. So they do have the same one.
Yeah.
So pretty comparable.
Oh yeah, the X3. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. So similar-ish with the Neptune monitor only one. I don't know what the monitor only comes with, but similar boat. Yeah, it's good. I like that they're being more competitive now with each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Keeps everyone innovating.
Yeah, that's what's good for us, man.
Heck yeah. I know.
Competitors drive innovation, man. That's what makes things better. Especially, I mean, for us as the consumers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's what it's all about.
Heck yeah. No local Wi-Fi is on talk about, just Bluetooth phone. I don't think anything has just Bluetooth, to be honest. Everything has Wi-Fi these days. Can't avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't get Bluetooth remote. So why, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a wireless way to connect to it, not a wireless way to like. The whole point of a controller is to notify you when you're not home.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's Bluetooth going to do for you then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Ring your doorbell.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah.
Could be your alarm mode just triggers your doorbell on over and over and over again. Drives your family nuts.
And hey, dude, that's something to talk about. Is like the whole, alarms, but not Apex alarms where it sends you a push notification, but an alarm, like a physical alarm, like a buzzer. The sound of your auto top off running dry. Like that's my alarm.
Yeah.
Especially for the ATO. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some value in those, and ATOs usually have a little beeper. Return pumps don't, or at least not normally. I mean, controllers are the way to go with that. That's how you get that, and that can be super valuable for, especially those that have complex tanks.
Yeah.
It'll save your equipment.
Okay, super geeky side rant question, Jimmy G. Can I split an Ethernet port from my PC to my Apex? Technically, yes, because most things that just use data are only using 4 wires out of the 8. So you can technically split a cable and hook 2 things off of it, but you got to split the same wires on both ends. So that is technically doable. If it's like stuff that's PoE or power, then obviously not. But if it's just basic communication, technically yes. But you're probably better just running a new wire. But Apex can be Wi-Fi anyway, so you don't really need to worry about that. But yeah, side rant. Sumps don't get enough attention. This is true. Sumps, is it a place do you make your sumps pretty? Or is it just a place to shove it all and hide it all?
I appreciate a good sump.
Yeah.
Sumps they'll change your life if you've been keeping aquariums without for a long time. I think having a sump is well worth the expense. It just certainly makes your life a lot easier. You have more room for stuff if you ever decide you want extra stuff.
Yep.
I think the biggest thing with the sump for me that is like you just have that extra water volume and it's easier to work with stuff. It keeps you're not going to run into the nutrient issues like you would with hang-on stuff. They're just more effective, man. Like,
yeah.
You can get more flow through them. You can have bigger, better equipment in them. Essential? No. Great?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've come to appreciate just big open sumps now over the years. Like I used to be like, you know, more like, yeah, little chambers and compartments for everything. But now I'm like, just space. Give me space for everything.
I'm at a point where I really hate my tiny sump space.
Yeah.
But I knew that. I mean, I wasn't. I'm not. I never would argue that I wouldn't that I would like it. I knew that going into it, and purposely let all the sides come off.
Yeah. Nice.
So yeah, I mean, not having space under your tank with a sump is kind of annoying.
Remember the Vertex sumps? Like they look super fancy, but it was like everything had a specific little tiny chamber. Like they look super hardcore fancy, but
yeah, I remember. Yeah, they had like
let me find a photo.
I remember they had like stackers, like things you could stack together. Like they had, I remember triangular shaped like chambers that you could stack together. Man, I have to look them up.
That was the other brand. You're thinking of
Somatic,
yeah, sorry, the Nest. That was like a Vertex sub brand. It was like their more affordable one. So here, this is one of the discontinued. That was one of the Vertex sumps. Like they look like super fancy and hardcore, but it sucked if you ready to change something in it. So now I'm just like, give me a nice. Holy crap, $2,500. It wasn't cheap. But now I'm just like, give me a big open space.
Oh yeah,
one or two chamber.
The Supras.
Yeah.
Yes. No. And yeah. So I'm with you, man. Mm-hmm. Having all that kind of plumbing down there, no fun at all.
Like it look cool, but it sucks to maintain, interchange, or do anything.
Yeah.
Horizon Broadband. Does anyone do deep substrate anymore? Not many. I find most people are relatively shallow unless there's a special purpose for going deep.
Yeah, it just gets clogged up. It's hard to keep clean. You can argue the whole denitrification effect, which happens, right? The science is there, but it just doesn't benefit. I just don't think the benefit outweighs the downside.
Yep. No, that's true.
And they look kind of more funky.
If I had garden eels, I would do a deep sand bed. or mangrove tank. Yeah, that's a good potential too.
Yeah. We need a good mangrove tank. We need somebody to design a good come out with a good mangrove design, right?
Yeah, that'd be good. Speaking of, I thought about doing it in my office tank. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe one day I'll add some mangroves to it. They're fun.
I tried figuring out my tank, but I just got I wanted coral and the lighting. I was like, man, the lighting's just gonna get all jacked up. So I planted the mangroves in dirt, stuck them outside.
Were they happy?
One is still alive. One of three.
That's pretty good. Just like in your yard, dirt.
I mean, dirt and sand, not just sand. I mixed like a little bit of dirt with sand. Yeah.
That's pretty cool, actually.
It's really humid here, and I mean, it survived one winter.
So far, so good.
But I brought it inside during the winter, and I have like a light and keep on all the tropical plants I have.
Yeah. So, yeah. So on the sand side, I'm going to say most people keep it pretty low and shallow these days. Just less maintenance, less buildup of fish poop and all that stuff long term. All right. One side rabbit hole versus controllers, whether or not nice to have. I know there's definitely a lot of the anti-controller people, but they still like the automation. A lot of people just use smart plugs. They're cheap, they're plentiful, just for turning stuff on and off. The only big difference there is it's convenient for you not reaching for a plug or a wire, but you can't necessarily automate them. At least the smart plugs I've seen, there has been a nice way to like trigger stuff based on something.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're gonna, well, I shouldn't say that. Like, smart plugs have their place, but at the same time, like, there's just a controller does so much more because it's made for an aquarium. Not only like, it's just you can trigger things, right? And that's the beauty of having a controller and like,
Well, not even that. If you want to turn your pump off for feed mode, open your app, turn off your smart plug. Same thing you can do on a controller, right? But if your tank is too hot, turn off your heater. You can't do that unless you have a controller that can act on it, right? And to me, that's the biggest difference, is you can do something based on an input where the input is not your finger, right? It's like based off of a sensor. And I think that's, in my mind, the biggest advantage if you go down the controller route. It's just, water level is too high, turn off my ATO, stuff like that. It's that backup.
Yeah. And that's the thing is with smart plugs, like anything that would be beneficial in a smart plug, just buy it smart from the get-go.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
Now,
aside from, but power heads, most of them are They're smart and programmable these days. Especially that are worth the salt. Like,
yeah. So
just spring forward up front, man. You'll be,
it's true.
so much happier long.
Now, side rabbit hole. Even if you have a controller, I still like independent smart things to do their job with the controller acting as a backup. So I've always been like somewhat hesitant because, a lot of the controllers, certain accessories for many of them, they're useless without the controller, right? So if something happens to the controller, they're useless. Where if you have something that's independent on its own, it does its thing, and the controller just acts as like the backup plan for it. And I think that's, if like you mentioned, like buying stuff that's smart from the beginning and then having that, I think that's like a really good way of adding that redundancy to basically everything long term.
Yeah, see, I don't know that I see the value in that too much.
So
I think in some situations, so like specifically having it on, the benefit for temperature, that's great. Yeah. Specifically having it for the benefit of pH if you're dosing, that's great because you can shut the doser down automatically if pH spikes real high. Yeah. For the water level, it's just such a rare thing. No, I mean, I guess it happens. I guess no, because you have your ATO overfill, which I guess is pretty nice. So for me, it's never happened though, where I've been away. I don't, I keep a big adamant like never anything bigger than a 5-gallon ATO chamber, and usually my sump can handle 5 gallons of water. I mean, tank's not gonna be happy, but
yeah,
before it overflows, right?
So for like stuff that's in my mind, like I automate refilling my 5-gallon ATO container or 10-gallon, whatever it is, so it refills. Well, that's why I like having multiple backup systems, right? So like on that one, I have, the controller turning the outlet on and off when required. So based on my level sensor. Now, on that plug is like the Flood Guardian. So that has its own optical sensor, its own, solenoid valve, right? So I have all that plus a flow valve. So, there's multiple layers of protection. So if one of them was to fail, there's still a backup to it. And that's kind of my Gear Junkie way of automating everything is I like having backups.
Is use a 5-gallon jug.
Yeah, but
use a 5-gallon jug and fill it up manually, which a little bit more work.
Yeah, too much work to fill it up.
Ensuring Devin's 3 layers of maintenance, like our fella said.
Yeah.
Ensuring that stuff is working as it should all the time. Is that more work? I think that's the argument.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. My next project actually, if those.
Devin, I don't think like we're searching for like, is there a right answer? There isn't.
Yeah, there is.
Right? There isn't. It's just, you can make it be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
I've seen beautiful tanks that are glass boxes, right?
But nothing else.
We have, look at all the reef bowls that are out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're great on their own. They are what they are. And then there's beautiful tanks that are in between, and there's, things that are in between.
We should do a little challenge one day to try and do the simplest tank possible. Like, pick like something small and just see like who can have success with like the most basic thing ever.
Well, you live where it's freezing cold, so how long does it take you to stay alive?
No, well, like for instance, if your room temperature is stable, do you need a heater if room temperature is good enough? Like that's what I mean. Like there's a lot of environmental things that can keep your tank super stable as well.
Well, like Julian's Brunk, it's a pond outside with clams in it.
Yeah, which would be sweet.
And like they're, and he lives in Florida, of course, which that's why he can do that. But yeah, I think you can get away with a pretty simple basic tank if you're smart about what goes in it.
Yeah.
You're smart about how you feed it, and you can still, and it can be beautiful. Like, don't let the, beauty's in the eye of the beholder for sure here, but you can still have a pretty impressive tank, and it'd be very simple.
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know. I appreciate both ends of the spectrum, and I want to be simpler, but I can't just because my curiosity makes me get way too many toys and experiment.
Well, I mean, for you and I both, what we do, like, there's a certain part of that where like, yeah, you can't, like, you have to, like, and this is why, like, I say I land in the middle is because I appreciate, like, because I've used a lot of different things, and the stuff that like I use on my tank now, like I really appreciate it, right?
Yeah.
And I do miss having a controller. I was just talking about this the other day to, I think it was Adam. Yeah, I think Adam on our team, but somebody at BRS. And we were talking about the Apex Junior, and I will end up with one. Like, I'm almost positive I will end up with one.
Yeah.
But I know as soon as I have that, it's gonna open the door to then I'm gonna start wanting to automate things, right? Now, am I ready for that? Do I want to do that? I told myself that this tank would be not that tank, right? Not that, I just want to automate it. I want it to be pretty. I want to focus on the livestock. Fish tanks are my work. They're my life. So having something that I can just really enjoy that's like that, and, fruits of my labor, and be good at it.
Yeah.
I kind of appreciate that with the tank that I have now.
Now, I have to ask from my perspective, if you're buying the Junior anyways, are you not just tempted to get the next level up that gives you more automation and control?
That's the thing that I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at is I might as well just buy an Apex. But the Junior, I can just buy an EBA32 and plug it in. I think almost positive I have a DCU. Almost positive I do.
Well, then you're good.
Old,
okay, you're good.
Yeah, that's exactly. The point is, you can just plug one in, right? Yeah. And so I can get that. So maybe that argument will work for me. But really, what I'm very most interested in right now is having pH monitoring, to where I can track it and optimize it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the temp monitoring.
Okay.
Just a redundant level of that, because I have my temp control system is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's never failed, and it's has a redundant control on it. But just being able to have the notification when I'm on a 3-day fishing trip or something would be nice.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's good.
And I have been lucky. There's usually always somebody home at my house, so that's a benefit that a lot could argue. Somebody that lives alone, works a lot away from the house, those are the situations where you want the controller. If you're gonna have a fish tank, you need to have a controller, right? For me, I think everybody but my 5-year-old daughter knows how to fill the ATO reservoir, right?
That's good. Now my question is, would you automate that now? If you had all the stuff to do it, would you automate refilling it so you don't have to worry about it?
I have all the stuff to do it, and I don't want to do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because I have I mix my water, and I have a 20-gallon brew, 2 of them right next to my tank.
Yeah.
So one's saltwater, one's fresh, and it's just as simple as running it over. It's literally right next to it, and I bought everything to do it, but I don't want to do it because I know what's gonna happen is it's gonna overfill. Someday that's gonna fail, and I've been super lucky. Mm-hmm. I've manually overfilled the ATO, just left the tube in there.
Yep.
Because I keep a pump in there constantly circulating anyway, so I just flip that pump off, put the tube in, fill up my ATO reservoir, and I'll get to blabbering with my kids or something, and I've overfilled it that way.
Yeah.
But I catch it real quick, and it's one beach towel, clean it up.
Yeah.
But I know if I automate it, one day it's just gonna happen. My pressure, my ASO valve on my RODI has been great. Mm-hmm. None of my floats have done leaked or done anything they're not supposed to do. So far it's been good, and I don't know. I'm hesitant to do it because the system works, right?
Yeah, that's
fair.
And
so is that the definition of essential? It works for me. I don't see it as essential. Mm-hmm. Probably not, right?
Yeah. Now, I just laughed at one of the comments in there. It says, I am the controller. So I did a video with a girl named Wincy probably about 2 or 3 years ago now. She had 7-foot, beautiful tank full of fancy acros, everything. She hand ATO'd it. She hand dosed it. So talking about you don't need this stuff. Every day she, morning dumps in 60 mils of alkaline calc, nighttime another 60 mils, grabs her couple gallon bucket, dumps that in every single day for ATO. So
that's the thing.
Essential
is kind of subjective.
I know.
And all that we've talked about today, it's kind of subjective because what's essential for Devin isn't essential for Robert, isn't essential for your friend. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can technically hand dose a tank, buy water at a fish store.
Yeah.
Top it off manually. Stick your finger in there to check the temperature,
yep.
And use a litmus paper to pH test it, right?
Yep.
You get my point. There are very basic ways to keep it super simple. So if that's something that, you find you can take it as far as you want to take it, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a place for all of that.
No, so true. It's fun. So many rabbit holes. I find it's so easy for me to get sucked into the techie side, but I also appreciate the simple side. So it's
and also let's stand up for the underdog here. Don't let the tech junkies like make you think like you're any less of a reefer because you don't have a controller or you don't have some super fancy equipment. It can be done very well with simple gear. Just be mindful of the things that can happen and the most common mistakes that do happen. And there's, you know, Mr. Apex Jr. that exists now. Like there is gear out there that can help you prevent those super common things.
Yeah.
Be mindful of those, right?
Nope, definitely. Now, I will say, though, if nothing else, I would recommend a heater controller, just because that's probably the most common thing to fail in a tank. Or you do both of these. Or if you're not, the other option, assuming you have a sump in space, I like doing 2 half-size heaters. That way, if one gets stuck on, it's not overpowered to cook your tank. If one dies, the other one is going to keep it afloat. So that's like the low-tech heater controller, or do 2 heaters with a heater controller for extra
so like,
safe. But
you got like Eheim Jaegers where the thermostat's built in, they're affordable, you know, under $40 or whatever they are. Just get 2 half-sizers. So, you know, just like Devin said, and the thermostats are built into those. There's no extra cords, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no extra controller with a, you know, another wired temp probe into it. Very easy and very simple.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's, a low-tech way to prevent the heater, the detrimental thing that happens with heaters most often. Now, if they both break at the same time, you're screwed, which is probably not going to happen.
Yeah, low odds, you're pretty safe there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I guess at the end of the day, choice is yours. It's basically nice and simple, a little more time, a little more care, or you get a little fancier and you can be a bit lazier. Bit of a trade-off, but either way, you can have a nice tank.
Yeah, if that's what the goal is for everybody, is a nice tank that lives a long time, happy and healthy fish. You can do it with especially in this day and age now that we have so much smart gear. Like you can do it with minimal stuff as long as you're smart with the way you stock it, right?
No, it's true. One day I will accept this challenge. Not anytime soon, but one day. All right, Robert. A good random side rants today of basically what do you need, what don't you need, different aspects.
Oh, it's fun, man. I mean, we're both gear junkies.
We are.
We really are through and through, right? So it's fun to talk about this stuff.
It is.
And like I said, I don't think there's one right answer.
No, that's true. You have partially inspired me though to try and do a macroalgae tank one day.
Dude, so much fun.
Maybe I'll do it in the sump of my.
That would be, you know, that's
the
low tech tank of dreams. Is like, and it could look so cool, man, so cool. Like they just look gorgeous. And yeah, you don't. I mean, talk about a low tech tank. I think you could get away with just a power head and a heater, light.
I think so too. Totally could.
Guaranteed. Like I don't think you would need anything else beyond that.
Even like a Zoa rock flower tank is all you need.
Yeah, it will Xenia too. Like Xenia's filter feed out, you know. Like a Zoa tank. Like I don't know. We should do this. Like take the reef bowl to the next level and like, you know, a 40-gallon reef bowl.
Yeah, even like a 5-gallon, something little.
Well, no, but I mean, like the reef bowl thing's been done because it's easy to do the 100% water change.
True.
But like, how far can you take it with like a bigger tank?
But even that, like, it just comes down to your stocking. Like, if you stock easy, hardy things that aren't sucking up your cow's milk, I mean, you barely have to worry about dosing. You know, 1 bucket water change, done, easy.
You're right. Well, thanks for having me on, Dim.
Thanks, buddy. I always enjoy these.
All you reef dudes and reef dudettes out there, you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, sir. All right, guys. As always, you enjoyed it, hit the like button. Got any stuff you want Robert and I to dig into on a future random reef rant? Let us know in the comments below. If you're new, subscribe. We'll catch you guys in the next live stream.